Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the KB Ear Lark. The Lark is the 1BA 1DD hybrid from KB Ear. Looks like this. This is actually the super nice case that it comes with. This is the Lark in purple with the shinier silverish faceplate. These are KZ star tips, and this is the KB Ear rhyme cable. And this is my try to tease a little low end out of an IEM setup. The rhyme is actually kind of good at lower end body, just adding a little bit, and my KZ tips tend to add a little bass for me. So this one came from the AK Audio Store on AliExpress. You can find that today for $29.99, but if you're really in the market for the Lark, I would wait until the 12/12 sale, because $29.99 is more expensive than it's been almost since it's been released. I think it was in the $25 range ish, maybe 24-ish on sale, 11.11. So thank you guys, AK Audio Store, for shipping that out to me. So what does the Lark sound like? Sort of in my one sentence version, I would say shallow V, fast bass, and the fast bass is really a characteristic that runs across the whole sound signature for me, because it just affects everything. And we'll kind of get into it, but some people really seek out fast bass. Some people don't. Some people like this slower, almost a KZ, slower bass, which is fine too. I think the Blonde BL03 is sort of famously for a slower bass. It's just kind of a more relaxing, easygoing sound. The faster bass kind of hits you hard and disappears, gets out of the way until the next note. Just a different style. Both fine. Neither is good nor bad. It's just what's more of your preference. So out of the box, it sounds a little bass light and brighter. So let it burn in for a little while. After a little bit, you'll notice that the bass kind of fills in a little bit, not much, but that brightness. This is the 4K version, so it's a little brighter, but I'm using EQ settings, so it should be pretty close to what retail is. But just remember, kind of out of the box, it's a little brighter, a little harsher than it will be a day or two later, depending on how much you listen to it. So let it settle in a bit. So if you've been following along on the Lark, you'll know that there's been a lot of good first impressions and a lot of good opinions, some good reviews. And I'll just kind of remind you to know your preference and perhaps know what their preference was when they're saying that. I mean, my opinion of it, it's more leaning towards critical listeners. It's a V shape, but it's shallow. It doesn't have that fun, engaging, more kind of a sharper V sound. It's a more relaxed, shallow V sound, and the fast bass, the very clean mids, it very much lends itself to more critical listeners who prefer details over fun and instruments over vocals. For me, it feels more like a tin hi-fi model than the KB Ear models, especially like the KS2, which is a very traditional V-shaped, big bass hybrid. The Lark is not that. The Lark is lighter and faster, very much a cleaner presentation than something like the KS2, which is very traditional V-shape. So as I was getting to know the Lark, someone had actually posted, Android had posted his review ripping apart the ASX and ASF, but he mentioned this jazz trio, the Go-Go Penguin, and check out this song, Signal in the Noise. So that is what I think people listen to when they really, really like the Lark. I think they're listening to primarily instrumentals. Vocals for me are distracting because they're a bit thin, and I just didn't really get it all that much. Some other people, perhaps like a thinner vocal, but the fast bass, the clean mids sort of leads you with a thinner vocal. It just doesn't have that low end. So, but when you listen to pure instruments, it sounds great. And do check out this, jazz trio, Go-Go Penguin, or other jazz. I think those are really what sound great on the Lark, and it does them very well. So yes, it does deserve a lot of the praise that it's been getting, but just keep in mind what those reviewers or what those people, what kind of music preferences they have, and make sure they do match your own. Because for me, I'm kind of a warmer V-shape vocal guy, and this wouldn't necessarily be my first preference. And I said the same exact thing about the Tin T2 Plus. You know, technically, both of them are great and deserve all the praise they got. They just wouldn't be the ones that I would grab, you know, on my way out the door. It's just not my preference. So do know your own preferences and make sure that this one sort of matches yours. So as I talked about, the bass is really fast, just enough. It's not boomy. It doesn't interfere with anything. It doesn't bleed into the mids. Just enough. It hits you hard, goes away. A lot of people like that bass that doesn't hang around, but it's very impactful when necessary. If you're a bass guy, a V-shaped guy, it's going to be perhaps a bit too fast. It's a bit unsatisfying, especially in those bass-driven genres. If you like kick drums, bass drums, where you like to hear it sort of a heavier thud, that's not the Lark. It's very much a hit and go. It's fast. There's plenty of bass there, but it's just not. It doesn't have that low end weight that you might be expecting. So again, know your preferences on that. So the mids, very clean, dark background. If you've never heard a dark background on an IM, it's kind of fascinating. It's like almost hearing the sound of nothing. It's the sound of blackness, and you get that a lot on the Lark because the mids are so clean. There's just very clean separation between the bass and the mids, and you just end up with this nothing in the middle. And especially if you have an amp with a nice low noise floor, yeah, it's that sound of black. It's fascinating, but definitely comes through on the Lark. And I know that's why people love this kind of sound, is you don't have the bass there to muddy anything. It's just a very clean note. And so, yeah, I understand why people really like the Lark, and it comes through. So instruments separated. My nitpicks, it's just not warm because there's almost no bass bleeding into the mids at all. So if you're expecting that lower bit on voices, it's just not there. It comes across a bit dry and thin for me. It's just not my favorite vocal presentation. Instruments, love them. Vocals, not as much. So a voice like Fleetwood Mac Dreams, where her voice, Stevie Nicks' voice, has that kind of low end, smoky growl at the bottom end. You just don't get that. It almost sounds like a younger version of Stevie Nicks, where she has a much higher voice. So as I said, it almost becomes distracting for me to hear the vocals. I very much preferred instrumentals to almost any vocals on the Lark. So yeah, it's just know what you're getting into. So the treble, I'll call it polite but detailed. It's a shallow V, so it's not very boosted. It's definitely present. It's definitely detailed. I like it more on the non-K version because on the 4K version, the 4K bump sort of gets in the way of hearing the treble. If you've never heard this 4K bump, it's especially on the vocals, it sort of hits you right in the center of your ear, especially on the vocals, and it becomes very fatiguing, very fast. And so between the very fast bass, the vocals at 4K, the whole thing, I understand why the tuner had issues with KB Ear leaving that 4K bump in there, because it becomes fatiguing very fast. But when you get rid of that, the treble kind of drops down to a level that's very appropriate, very balanced with the amount of bass that's there. So you end up with this shallow V. It's not quite neutral, but the two pair together very well, and I wouldn't say that one really dominates the other. I think they're nicely matched. If you like a sharper V shape, obviously it's going to be not quite as much treble level for you, but that's not what they were going for, so just be aware of that. So the staging has this kind of natural, just beyond your ears feel to it. The instruments feel separated, and the only thing that I would really nitpick in was the vocals just need a little more space. Because I found them so distracting and they're always in front, I was always trying to listen to the instruments that were behind, and I always had this thing that was right in front, and it sort of annoyed me after a while. And I just stopped listening to some of the playlists that I normally listen to just because I was annoyed by the vocals, and I'd much rather hear Fleetwood Mac the band than Stevie Nicks the singer. And kind of I went through that over and over again, and I just wish there was sort of a little more space around the vocals and the instruments were pushed to the side a little bit, so I had sort of a clearer view of them as opposed to always trying to hear around the vocals, which I didn't really care for to begin with. So that's it. But then, almost like the Tin T2 Plus, I had the same exact comment. Was there are certain songs that sound really well, especially staging wise, and No Scrubs by TLC. If you haven't listened to that in a decade, fire that one up as well. So that guitar in the beginning, the black background, those guitar notes, that's exactly where the Lark shines. And then her voice, their voices, they're kind of a higher, you're not missing any of that low end from the voices, any of that warmth, because they have a higher end voices, sound great. And at the same time, the whole thing fills the stage, and you're like, yeah, this is exactly, I wish every song sounded exactly like this. So just a good one that popped out at me on the Lark, and someone will probably comment that my music of No Scrubs is an awful selection, but just saying that's not the best song in the world, but on the Lark, it kind of hits a bunch of points that I wish every song had hit, and stage-wise, and those notes, everything came together on that song. So not to say the song is amazing, but on the Lark sounds kind of amazing. So again, that's about it. So thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.